Good morning, church. We are Antonio and Virgin Fernandez. We have been married for 36 years. I'm also known as Tony Sr., so as not to be confused with the dynamic young evangelist of this church. I was born in the Bronx, New York, and raised by a single mom and my grandfather in Puerto Rico. There, I attended a parochial school until the second grade. Together, we returned to New York, where we were introduced and attended a Protestant church. I'm thankful for the fatherly influence my grandfather provided, but there is always that internal need of a child to know and connect to their genetic father. While I did know my father, I had little contact with him. Don't let anybody ever tell you that little boys don't need their dads. Growing up, I promised myself when I got married and had children, I would do everything in my power to stay in their lives. I was going to be the dad I never had. As an adult, I dabbled in Christianity. I believed I had a moral compass because I believed there was a God. I wanted my family, especially my children, to get an opportunity to know him, but I did nothing about it. I joined the police department in New York in 1982. I was promoted to detective in 1989, was a financial secretary for my union and active in the Hispanic Society. I was upwardly mobile. The thought was that the more money and prestige I had, the better I could care for my family. I also fell into the trap where I could keep a family in the suburbs and a girlfriend in the city. As you can probably tell by now, my dream of being a great father and husband wasn't exactly working out.
I was born in Puerto Rico and raised in Brooklyn, New York, by my single mom and my grandmother. My mother worked to raise 3 children while my grandmother took care of us. I also knew my father, but he was never really in the picture. My family was raised going to church, but our attendance was based on my grandmother's attendance. Once she passed away, we all stopped going to church totally. I didn't see a need for God until my first marriage, when my eldest son, Devin, was born with a genetic heart problem which devastated me. My sister, who was religious, helped me to see the need for God in prayer. At 5 years old, my son was scheduled for open heart surgery. The surgery was not guaranteed to work, so I prayed for miracles and made many promises to God if it was successful. God answered my prayers, but I didn't keep my promises. While I visited and tried to get connected to some local churches, I really never felt accepted. I soon became a single mother of 2. Then I eventually met and married Tony in 1986. Together we had 2 more children, then moved out of New York City to the suburbs of Rockland County. On or about the beginning of 1998, my daughter was invited to church. Her friend's mother, Nettie, was and is a faithful Christian who attends the Rockland sector of the Hudson Valley Church of Christ, one of our sister churches in New York. Our families were neighbors, and because of that, interaction at supermarkets and social events were unavoidable. The next few weeks, I would avoid Nettie as she wouldn't stop inviting me to church at any opportunity she had. Eventually, and after much thought, I decided to confront this woman. The deal was this: I would attend one service, and then Nettie would not and should not ask me again. So one spring Sunday, off we went to church with my 4 children, Devin, Jovan, Diana, and Tony Jr., but no dad. Diana had enjoyed her visit to church and had also asked me to attend. My first impression was that I loved the fact that each of my children had a home or a group to be with. I saw the faithful adult men singing in bold voices and praising the Lord. I thought, these men are really mighty men. Most importantly was the love that the church body displayed. I made up my mind right there and then to return, and I did. For the next few weeks, the children and I would attend Sunday church services.
I often worked on weekends, and I didn't know my family had been going to church. One Sunday, I observed the hustle and bustle of a family with a purpose. I'm thinking, what's this? What's going on? Where are you going? I asked Virgin. She said, church. I had attended churches of different denominations and races, but could not see myself being part of any of them. I had restrictions set for God before I would commit to a church. It had to be a nice building. The congregation should not be all white, all black, and absolutely not all Latinos. Basically, the church I wanted was I was the only member. I started to think of what a great opportunity this was to help my wife and children find spirituality, that I could lead them to God, even if I didn't stay. The other thought was, it's Sunday. I could watch all the football I want. Then I thought, you hypocrite, how can you expect them to go and not you? So as I began to dress, Virgin asked, where are you going? I'm going with you. She recalls, she said, oh no, why doesn't he find his own church? As she walked out of the room and announced that Dad was coming along, the children responded with joy. So we arrive at the place where the church met, the Clarkstown Reformed Church, established in 1750, a beautiful building, steeple, stained glass, organ, the works. The first people I recall meeting there were the Ponsadas, a Filipino couple. God has a real sense of humor. The love and worship and teaching were incredibly amazing. I decided then to continue to attend. Over a month later, we attended an outside service. At this point, God has softened my heart a bit. Unfortunately, my head was a little soft as well. I recall I had a bit of a hangover because I had gone out the night before from work, and so my wife and I were not in good graces. She really wanted no part of me. I noticed that Virgin did not save me a seat. So I sat in the front row where there was one man sitting in deep prayer. The service began, and I found out that man was Sheridan Wright, the guest preacher for the day. He began with his story of a time when he was in college that he needed easy credits. As an athlete, he was sure that fencing would provide those credits. He described the nuances of the sport, how it was very simple to dodge the thrust to the heart, thereby avoiding the touches or what are their points. He compared that to how we often avoid the word of God, touching our hearts in the same way. He asked this day that we would stand full frontal to God and allow ourselves to be pierced. I took on his challenge. The man began to preach. I don't remember much else except the conviction of my wretchedness. I slowly began to weep, hiding my face from my son, who was sitting next to me. I excused myself. I went down the road about 30 yards where I wept. I cried out to God, begging for his forgiveness. My heart overflowed with self-pity, anger at my sin, how I had hurt the people I most loved, and saddened by my condition. And I was also crying because I finally felt the hope and joy of the fact that I knew that from that moment on, I was going to be different. I don't recall how long we were there, but Tony Jr. soon appeared. He was distressed and asked what was wrong and why was I crying. I explained that I was a very bad man. He protested and attempted to console me. But I explained that things were going to be different and things were going to change. I found one of the brothers, and in front of my wife, I explained that I wanted to study the Bible. To my surprise and elation, Virgin agreed to as well. During my studies, I understood God's love and offer of forgiveness for me. I decided, unlike before, to actually do something about it. I also saw that God wanted to help me be the husband and father I had always longed to be. In November of 1998, I made Jesus Lord and was baptized into Christ.
While I announced my intention to study the Bible along with my husband, I really had no interest. I thought, he's the one that needs it, and he will never make it. And let's see how long this lasts. I had no faith in him. We had been attending the church for a few months, and I loved the congregation, but I felt no need to be baptized. I did start studying different times, but I always found fault with the women who were trying to help me. As time went by, I saw the love and respect the women showed their husbands and the patience they had with their children, and I wanted to learn that. I realize now that it was impossible to do it without me first loving God. Up to that time, God was just someone I prayed to whenever I had a need, but I wasn't looking for a relationship with him. That's why I could easily get angry at my husband and just stop loving him. My deepest secret was praying to God that he would get my husband a girlfriend and they would live happily ever after. Or maybe God can just kill him. I was in a very dark place. One Wednesday night after midweek, I remember Tony looking at me very sadly, holding his hands very tightly, and he said, "I am trying to love you." I was shocked. Did he just say he's trying to love me? He must be crazy. But as I looked at my husband, I felt so bad. He had been a disciple for 7 years, and he was still trying to make our marriage work with no help from me. I saw a vision of him pulling a cart all alone while the family sat comfortably inside the cart. First, it broke my heart. Then it convicted me to really seek and learn about God, who keeps his promises, even though I have broken my promises to him many, many times. Proverbs 3:27 says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to act." That Sunday, I met with sisters to study the Bible, and during my studies, I learned about God's love for me, his mercy, his grace, and his forgiveness. I decided to make Jesus Lord of my life, and in February 2005, I was baptized into Christ by my husband and my son, Tony Jr. Thank you.